Israeli occupation forces completely evacuate Kamal Adwan hospital. The Arida border crossing between Syria and Lebanon goes out of service due to an Israeli attack earlier today. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow could deploy its hypersonic, the intermediate-range ballistic missile system, in Belarus in second half of 2025. It's almost 8 p.m. Call local time, and you are now watching Q News. We begin tonight's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. Israeli occupation forces have completely evacuated Kamal Adwan Hospital. In the early hours of today, the occupation military ordered the hospital director to evacuate everyone and pass through a checkpoint to leave the area. There is a very heavy presence of Israeli military forces, including armored vehicles, tanks and quadcopters, which are visibly monitoring the area, firing at any moving objects, whether within the area or inside the facility. The World Health Organization's regional representative has stated that the agency has no indication that a warning was issued prior to Israel's bombing of Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. Rick Peppercorn from the World Health Organization expressed concern over the attack on the hospital, noting that it took place just a week after Israeli authorities had facilitated the entry of an Indonesian emergency medical team. He also highlighted that the WHO's ongoing concerns about the slow pace of medical evacuations from the Israeli besieged territory. Peppercorn emphasized that at the current rate of evacuations, it would take 5 to 10 years to relocate Gaza's approximately 12,000 patients to locations where they could receive proper care. Dozens of civilians have been killed and many more wounded in an Israeli shelling that targeted various areas in the northern and southern war-torn Gaza Strip. Israeli occupation forces bombarded a residential block near Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, killing over 30 civilians and injuring many others. 2 civilians were also killed in the occupation's bombardment of the Rafa'i school in Jabalia, where displaced people have sought refuge. 3 civilians were killed in an Israeli airstrike targeting the Khreibat al-Ads area north of Rafah. German Foreign Minister spokesperson Sebastian Fischer stated that Germany does not recognize any such clear intention. Fisher added that Israel is acting in defense. The London-based human rights group released a 300-page report on Israel's offensive in Gaza, stating that its findings were based on satellite images document devastating fieldwork and ground reports from people in Gaza, as well as dehumanizing and genocidal statements by Israeli government and military officials. Kamala Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza, faces severe challenges due to a 2-month siege by Israeli occupation forces, impacting healthcare and civilians amid ongoing conflict and calls for ceasefire and aid access.
Kamal Udwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, located in the northern Gaza Strip, has been under a strict siege imposed by Israeli occupation forces for nearly 2 months. This blockade has prevented the delivery of essential supplies, including medicine, food, medical staff and ambulances, severely impacting the hospital's ability to function. Israeli forces raided the hospital, forcing medical staff and patients to evacuate and detaining many individuals inside. Additionally, a nearby residential block was targeted and blown up, resulting in several civilian deaths and injuries. The occupation forces has also stormed the hospital, continuing their aggressive actions against both healthcare workers and the vulnerable patients within. The residents of Beit Lahia continue to endure relentless bombardment, widespread destruction, and severe shortages of food and medical supplies. Thousands of people have been displaced as the Israeli forces raid shelters during the escalating military operations that began on October 5, 2024. Amid this ongoing crisis, calls for ceasefire continue with countries and international organizations arguing for immediate action to protect civilian lives and restore humanitarian aid access.
And for more analysis, we move now to Salma Marwan, my dear colleague in our newsroom. Salma.
Thank you so much, Rana. For further analysis, we are joined from Ramallah by military and strategic expert Major General Habis El-Sharouf. Mr. Habis, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. First off, what are the reasons behind the increase in attacks in northern and southern Gaza, and how do they affect the civilian population?
Evening to you and to your viewers. In fact, Israel is currently having a very ferocious campaign against the Palestinian people. There are certain objectives that Israel wants to achieve. It wants to submit Hamas and force Hamas to go for negotiations. It wants to displace the Palestinian people. And the latest criminal acts by Israel is aimed to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state and demolish every kind of infrastructure, whether health-wise, economic-wise, or whatever. So recently, Israel has destroyed the hospital and attacking civilians, and this is totally violating and coming against the international laws and the international norms. These crimes are supposed to be held accountable by the international law and international humanitarian law. Israel is now waiting for Trump to come to office, and Israel is trying to win some points for the time being. It wants to have full control. It wants to establish a de facto and a status quo on the ground. And when there is a ceasefire, when there is a ceasefire, Israel will have the upper hand in the negotiations before the ceasefire.
Speaking of demolishing the infrastructure you've mentioned, how does its destruction impact the daily life and essential services for residents in Gaza?
The situation in the Gaza Strip is catastrophic on the humanitarian level and on every possible level. There is no food, no water, no medication, so people are forced to steadfast under these attacks and under this barbaric attacks by the Israeli. So the Israelis want just displacement. They want to starve the people so as they leave the place and get displaced. But the Palestinians in Gaza are steadfasting in their own land, and they know that they are pressured for displacement, but they have no other way. They are armless, and still they are bombarded every day and night. So they can do nothing but steadfasting against the Israeli aggression and trying to survive under the current attacks. The Netanyahu right-wing government, they wanted to establish more losses among the Palestinians before Trump comes to office. They wanted to kill more civilians and to demolish more infrastructure, so Gaza Strip will become inhabitable. And this is a new policy by Israel. They wanted to have settlements inside Gaza Strip. And the far right in Israel wants to establish this on the ground. But the thing that is really changing the course of this war is the steadfasting of the people of Gaza and failing the plans of the right-wing government.
On the other hand, Israel is also expanding its incursions into the occupied West Bank. What are the implications of this on the overall security and the political situation?
Israel never stopped incursions into the West Bank because the Israelis and Ben Gvir says West Bank is Yehuda and Samira, so they want to control as much as possible of the sea areas in West Bank. They wanted to enhance their settlement, to confiscate more land, and to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state and to limit the Palestinians. So Israel in the West Bank never stopped its aggression, not even a single day till now. And there had been more settlements and more confiscation of land. And this is absolutely, totally against all the resolution of United Nations and the Security Council. But the Palestinians are just facing this with their bare chests. They are now mobilizing the popular resistance. And this is the only thing they have for the time being, because in the end, they need help and support from the Arab, Islamic, and regional support and international support, of course, to stop the aggression against West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Now, according to Israeli media, the possibility to implement an exchange deal of hostages and detainees is serious this time. Yet with these developments taking place in Gaza and the West Bank, how do these influence the broader prospects for ceasefire negotiations?
Is the one who has hindered the exchange of hostages. He has put the sticks in the wheels. Egypt has offered a number of proposals to have a ceasefire and to exchange the hostages. The Palestinians agreed to this, but the one who crippled all that was Netanyahu. Netanyahu does not want anything but expansion, but to meet his political objectives and his military objectives that he has set since the first day of the aggression of the war. And Netanyahu till now is the one that creates the obstacle. But he says to the world that Hamas is the obstacle. But the fact is, Netanyahu is the one who rejects the truce, the agreements, and everything. Netanyahu and some of his people in his government believe that these hostages are like casualties of war, so they wouldn't care about them. And Netanyahu is continuing the aggression, and I believe Netanyahu does not want a ceasefire. And if there is a ceasefire, he wants it to be temporary, because he did not achieve his objectives other than the killing, assassinations, and destruction. Other than this, Netanyahu did not change his image to the world. So Netanyahu before trying to be like a pigeon of peace, but now he is a fully recognized war criminal with the testimony of human rights organizations and many institutions all over the world. All the world is against racism and apartheid policies by the right-wing Israeli government.
That was military and strategic expert Major General Habis El-Sharouf from Ramallah. Thank you so much for your insights and for all the information you provided us with. Now we're going to move back to Rana for more news and developments around the world.
Thank you, Salma. Around 200 displaced Palestinians in the southern Gaza city of Qnews have queued at a charitable kitchen to secure a meal for the day, but only a few were able to leave with food. The World Food Programme warned today that the humanitarian response in Gaza is nearing collapse as famine looms. The UN agency stated that Israeli restrictions on aid entry and the breakdown of law in the territory have made it difficult for aid convoys to reach displaced Palestinians. Gaza-based health authorities have announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has climbed to over 44,612, with over 105,834 wounded. Medical reports stated that the Israeli occupation forces carried out 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours, killing 32 civilians and injuring 95 others. Thousands of patients in Gaza are waiting for Israeli approval for urgently needed medical evacuation to receive treatment for war wounds or chronic diseases. Among the thousands of patients are at least 2,500 children whom UNICEF says must be transported immediately. According to the United Nations, since the war began last October, Israel has approved above 39% of evacuation requests. The WHO reports that 14,000 patients of all ages need medical evacuation from Gaza, including more than 4,300 children. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has unveiled plans to dismantle the civil administration in the West Bank, marking a key step in his broader plan to annex the territory to Israel. Smotrich explained that work was underway to bring this vision to the table. Extremist Israeli settlers have carried out a series of attacks against Palestinians and their property in several West Bank areas. According to the mayor of Silwed, that has dozens of settlers broken into Al Burj area near the town, erecting tents, raising Israeli flags, and displaying banners with racist slogans. Another group of settlers attacked Palestinian residents in the Birin area, east of Yatta in the Hebron Governorate, and threatened to expel them to make way for further settler expansion.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
The Arida border crossing between Syria and Lebanon has gone out of service due to an Israeli attack early today. According to Lebanon's transport minister, Israeli strikes have hit 2 border crossings linking Lebanon with Syria. He said that the strikes hit just across the border on the Syrian side of both the Arida crossing in northern Lebanon and the crossing which links to eastern Lebanon. The Israeli Occupation Army has claimed that it has intercepted a suspicious aerial target launched towards the Upper Galilee region in northern Israel near the Lebanese border. The army stated an investigation was underway. This marks the second time that sirens were heard in northern Israel since the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon began last week. Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri has officially invited U.S. presidential envoy Amos Hochstein to attend the January 9th parliamentary session dedicated to electing a new president. The invitation was extended during a phone call between the two officials, during which Hochstein reportedly expressed his commitment to accepting the invitation. The upcoming session marks another critical step in Lebanon's efforts to address its prolonged presidential vacuum amid political, security and economic challenges. Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated that Moscow could deploy its Oryshnik intermediate-range ballistic missile system in Belarus in the second half of 2025. Putin said Belarus would determine the targets of Oryshniks deployed on its territory. Russia fired the Oryshnik at a Ukrainian city last month in what Putin described as a first test of the weapon in combat conditions.
У нас есть, и я это не шутя сказал, определенные места.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko have signed a treaty on mutual security guarantees in Minsk. Putin stated that the signed treaty will enable reliable protection and security of both Russia and Belarus, creating the conditions for further peaceful and sustainable development of the two states. Lukashenko, who has been in power in Belarus since 1994, remarked in October that any use of Russian nuclear weapons now stationed in Belarus would require his personal approval. Moscow and Minsk always conduct joint military exercises, and a Russian-led post-Soviet military bloc is scheduled to hold drills in Belarus next September.
Независимости и конституционного строя России и Беларуси, целостности и неприкосновенности территорий и внешней границы союзного государства.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has appointed Alexander Qnews, acting governor of southern Kursk region, saying crisis management was needed in the area. Putin said Qnews, in addition to his experience in, of course, the legislature, had acted for 2 years as an advisor to Russia's National Guard, and that experience in the security forces will have to be used to achieve the tasks that lie before you. Ukrainian troops made a large-scale incursion into the broader region of Kursk in August. Russia's military says some of the territory initially seized has been recaptured by Moscow's troops. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that the use of a hypersonic missile in the Ukraine conflict sought to make the West understand that Moscow was ready to use any means to ensure no strategic defeat would be inflicted on Moscow. Lavrov also said it was a very serious mistake for anyone in the West to presume that Russia had no red lines or that they were being moved again and again. Lavrov also described U.S. President-elect Donald Trump as very friendly, but rejected the notion that Trump is pro-Russian, noting that during his presidency, Trump imposed numerous sanctions on Russia.
Allies of the United States who also provide this long range.
Deloitte, in its 2025 outlook for the oil and gas sector, predicts further consolidation in the oil field services industry next year. This comes amid expectations that U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will ease the restrictions on the nation's oil and gas sector. Deloitte noted that smaller oil field service companies might pursue strategic acquisitions as their client base consolidates and shrinks. This trend follows a surge in mergers and acquisitions among exploration and production companies. According to Deloitte, in the first 9 months of 2024, deals in the oil field services sector reached $19.7 billion, the highest since 2018. OPEC countries have decided to extend 2 key voluntary oil production adjustments aimed at stabilizing the market on the sidelines of the 38 OPEC and non-OPEC ministerial meeting. The first adjustment will extend the 1.65 million barrels per day cut until December 2026. Additionally, the 2.2 million BPD adjustment from November 2023 will be extended until March 2025 and then phased out gradually until September 2026, with the option to pause or reverse based on market conditions. During the meeting, overproducing countries pledged to fully confirm and resubmit their updated compensation schedules by December 2024, extending the compensation before period until June 2026.
I would just, set up the chart.
That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Israeli occupation forces completely evacuate Kamela Adwan Hospital. The Arida border crossing between Syria and Lebanon goes out of service due to an Israeli attack earlier today. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow could deploy its Orshinik intermediate-range ballistic missile system in Belarus in the second half of 2025. This concludes our news bulletin for tonight. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates at Qnews.